Good evening, everybody, on this wonderful Sunday. So great to see you all in the chat. Man, have we got an amazing program for you tonight. We want to thank each and every one of you out there who trust the interview room with your time and the fact that you trust us to bring these stories to you in a very real life. And we are grateful to our mods, to our Patreon members, to our members here on YouTube, and to our subscribers. We ask only one thing, and that's you subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up, and then the most important piece of this whole puzzle is you share this. And you share this one specifically to every one of your social media networks around the world. Imagine putting yourself in the shoes of a mom for a moment where you get a phone call. And in that phone call is a friend of your daughter's who's in a severe panic. And that panic is turn on the TV. And when mom does that, she sees her daughter's car and her friend's car, they're roommates and they used to work together, on the news. And it flashes across the screen, double homicide, 2 27-year-old women found inside of an apartment. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about Rachel Glass, Rachel is here, who is Nicole Glass's mom, and Melissa Mason, who was pregnant at the time. Nicole and Melissa were found in Phoenix in 2010, and they were the girls in that apartment. And Rachel's going to tell us about her experience trying to get justice for her daughter and for Melissa. And it has been one heck of a fight, to the point where she's even had to get folks involved to push Phoenix Police Department and those in that area to get motivated. My goal here tonight, along with our panel, will be Dr. Gary Bricotto and John Lamb with us tonight, is for Rachel to get a phone call from Senator Kelly. That will be the goal as we discuss her case, because you're going to see and hear directly from Nicole's mom. So without further ado, let me introduce Rachel Glass. Good evening.
Hello.
And put up John and Dr. Bricotto. It's great to see you guys.
Thanks for having us here, Chris. This is an important night.
This is, and Dr. Mercado, how are you doing? You're on mute.
It's a pleasure. Pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Rachel reached out through a friend, a mutual friend of ours. Those of you who know Josephine know that she is a machine and an amazing human being who has suffered in her life. And Rachel has been just asking questions it's been 15 years and 4 months now. It was December of 2010. And so tonight we're going to tell Nicole's story. And I want you guys to, in the chat, you're very powerful. Remember when we had Rachel Marin's family on before they caught the suspect and got anything accomplished on that one? We were saying some things here with their family about helping and pushing forward. And ultimately, they captured that guy in Oklahoma, and he has since and subsequently been arrested and charged and convicted. So that's because of you guys. He was spotted in a bar in Oklahoma, and the police swooped in, got a DNA hit on him, and lo and behold, the rest is history. If we do this right on true crime channels like the Interview Room, we can really be a force for good. And that's the goal here. That is the goal. The force for good is for Nicole and Melissa, and a force to be reckoned with is her mother, Rachel, who has been fighting from the day she got that phone call. So I want to remind everybody about, let's be civil if we can, and let's be courteous to Rachel's story as a mom and as a victim's mother, as we would anybody else. And this is not a compare and contrast against Nancy Guthrie or anything, to that matter. But it is important that we raise the awareness of the fact that Rachel has not received a phone call from Senator Kelly. And I mean that sarcastically, because she's waiting for one as well. And it goes to show, statistically what's going on in California. And let me give you some statistics in Arizona. And let me give you some long-term historical statistics about homicides. Since 1965, and Dr. Gary, who's a statistic genius, he's got that 25-pound brain. In Arizona, there were 18,490 homicides. And I'm going to give everybody the big picture as we kick off to talk about Nicole tonight. Okay? Now think about this. The overall clearance rate currently stands at about 64% in the state of Arizona, leaving an estimated 6,695 unsolved homicides approximately. So now, how do we measure that up against the national statistics? Approximately 352,000 homicides went unsolved in the same period from 1965 to 2026, with a clearance rate generally declining over time, and that the national average hovers around 50 to 60% in recent decades. That roughly means in Arizona, 1 in 3 murders from the past 60 years remains unsolved, including cases like Nicole's and Melissa's. So the recent trends in homicide data in 2026 is about 61% of homicides are solved, slightly better than the national average, but still leaving a significant backlog. Being fair and objective, we're going to talk about the Phoenix Police Department tonight, and they often report a very strong clearance rate, approximately 92% in parts of 23. There were 74% in 24. That number was about the same. However, older cases quickly move to the cold case homicide unit. And unsolved cases over a year it takes a homicide unit over a year to move the dial on these types of cases. So subsequently, Phoenix Police Department's backlog, and put your seatbelts on, is estimated at nearly 2,400 unsolved murders in recent years. Nicole and Melissa fall into that bucket. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. And we think that Kelly has some power because Rachel is one of his constituents. And she's here to tell us about her daughter and the situation that her family finds herself in. And so, Rachel, first of all, I want to just, in all sincerity, on behalf of Dr. Picotto and John and myself, we are grateful that you've entrusted us tonight with your story before this audience.
Thank you.
And so I want to start off a little bit about, Nicole's personal story. Tell us a little bit about Nicole. I mean, her personality, what she was like as a daughter, her dreams, and what she was doing, leading up to December of 2010.
Okay. In our family, Nicole had horses when she grew up, and she was really an animal person, and so she had 2 dogs, and anyway, when she was murdered, she had 2 dogs, and anyway, she was loved by all of our family. We have a great big family here in Arizona, and everybody loved her. It would be like when she would come to the family get-togethers, it was like, Nicole's here, Nicole's here. It's pretty sweet, And anyway, she was a junior at the University of Phoenix getting her degree in communications when this happened. So
she's studying communications, and I'm sure she had huge plans for her future.
Oh, yeah.
So as a mom, whenever Karen and I talk about, life as a whole, what milestones do you miss most about the situation? I mean, weddings, grandkids, holidays.
Yes.
You never got a chance to share those with her.
No, she didn't have children. And so actually I've missed out on being a grandparent. That's not going to happen. And, it's this angst that you have all the time about, even when you see family my family with their children and their grandchildren. I am so happy for them, but a little piece of my heart is broken because I'll never have that. I'll never have that experience, and that just kills me, to tell you the truth. It does. I always wanted to be grandma, so that's pretty hard to deal with. It is. It is. But
So this,
go ahead.
no, that's all right. I didn't mean to step on you. I apologize.
Oh, she was an amazing woman. She was a mover and a shaker. I have to hand her that. She was. She people loved her. Her friends still contact me, still reach out to me, still call me, see how I'm doing. It's amazing. You know, other people that I know that have lost children, their kids' friends don't. You know, they don't have anything to do with that parent, but these kids knew Nicole, knew her well, knew her in grade school, high school. These are the friends. I mean, at her funeral, I stopped counting at 215, and there was still a line out the door.
Wow.
So, you know, when they said, well, how many people do you estimate? And I said, I have no idea. So,
wow, she was a force for good, for sure.
Yes, she was. She was a sweet girl.
So,
yeah.
The memories that you have, and by the way, we will never ever get tired of talking about her on this program ever. If you want to throw rocks at 2:00 in the morning, you know you're in the TIR family now. So,
Okay.
you know you've got thousands of people that are going to support you. Okay, and hopefully we can turn this in, because the type of memories that it's great to see you smile for a moment, because I know the depth of that pain. And Gary, what you wanted to say something?
No, I'm just very moved by the story, and how obvious it is that your daughter's passing left a kind of hole in your heart. You know, it's very clear, and you know, I just hope that we can help in some way. I mean, after all these years, you know, that you're not giving up hope that the case could be solved is really amazing. And you know, it's horrifying, because one of the things, you know, we didn't give our backgrounds and the stuff, because I think it's good we put the focus on you. But I happen to be someone with expertise in what is called mass murder, where 3 or more people are killed at the same time. And this story is a mass murder, because Melissa was 8 months pregnant. 3 people were killed.
No, she was 2 months pregnant. Excuse me. She was 2 months pregnant, not 8.
2. Oh, in my notes I have 8.
No, she was just 2 months pregnant.
It's still a mass murder.
Yeah, it's still pregnancy, so it's still counts.
But the point is that, but I'm going to correct that. Thank you. But the point is that it really drives home how extraordinary this is, and the type of person that would do it, which is something I hope we'll be able to help you with. Chris and I are members of a foundation called the Cold Case Foundation, which works every day to help people like yourself with solving unsolved homicides. John is like Chris, a homicide detective who's, you know, and these are people who, alongside my psych insights, might be able to help you sort of get a sense that this person could actually be found. It's all about who gets the resources, that getting gobbled up in the system, and the attention, or the sort of not being available because there's so many other cases. And when you get a bunch of smart people with hearts together to work on a case, you'd be surprised what can be done. And you know, who knows how you found your way here, but I think it's going to be a helpful thing.
Yeah, and so let's you know, to Dr. Mercado's point, let's walk us through, you know, that day, December 3rd, 2010, and the moment you first learned something was wrong, and how you found out about Nicole and Melissa. Help our audience understand that.
So at that time, I was working a night shift, and I hadn't, and it was my day off on Friday and Saturday. So I didn't sleep because I was planning on sleeping that night. And about 5:15 in the evening, I get a call from Nicole's friend, screaming and saying, "Oh my God, Rachel, I think Nicole and Melissa are dead inside the house. Turn on the TV." I'm like, what? And this girl was pregnant. She was expecting a baby. And I said, "Oh my God, you calm down because you could lose your baby. Let's just breathe." And I said, "I'm going to go and I will call you and let you know what I find out." And my husband and I got in the car. We drove over to Nicole's house. And on the way there, we called the police. And I said to the 911 operator, I said, "Can you tell me if you're at my daughter's house?" And they said, I'll never forget it, "Ma'am, we can't tell you that, but what vehicle are you in?" And I went, "Oh my God, you are there, And so we got there about 6:00, and it was cold. It was cold that night. And it was a media frenzy, and so much of the media was out there, and it was just kind of pandemonium to me. And so we ended up going across the street to a restaurant and just sitting in there and getting out away from the media and figuring out what we were going to do with it. Well, I didn't even know for sure if it was her, because they wouldn't tell me that it was her or not. So they said they would have to let me know because they're waiting on a search warrant. And so they wouldn't tell me whether that was Nicole or not. And so my husband and I got in a hotel real close and stayed there. And then at 3:00 in the morning, they called us and said it was her and Melissa. But nobody ever came to my door and knocked on it and said, to tell me what had happened. I had to see it on TV. And I'll tell you, that did leave me very traumatized. It did. It was awful. To find out that way.
And you had just come off of a shift as you were a jail nurse. Is that correct?
Yeah, at that time I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're working with potentially the type of people that would end up maybe even in your jail.
Yeah.
Okay. Did they tell you, well, walk us through what that moment was like when you heard?
Well, I had called my sister and I asked her to call my family and let her know. And then I had to call Nicole's dad and tell him. And that was really, it was awful. It was the worst day of my life. The very worst day of my life. But they said to come back to her house because when the fire department came in, they had broke the door. So we had to, get the door secured. And so that's what I ended up doing, is just going back and,
So after they notified you, and they notified you on the phone.
Yeah.
Not in person?
No.
Okay. Did they tell you what had happened? They give you an indication other than your daughter's?
No, they didn't know. They didn't know at that time. I mean, they died from ligamental strangulation. At least that's what was on Nicole's death certificate. Okay. And I didn't know that meant strangulation with a device.
Okay.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Oh, John. Yeah.
When was the first time that you actually spoke in person with a representative of the Phoenix Police Department?
About 6:00 on December 3rd, 2010, when we got to her house.
Okay, but after that, once you had been notified, after they had served the search warrant, did they subsequently come and talk to you?
No. They called me at 3:00 in the morning and to tell me that was her.
But after that, did they want to interview you? Did they say they wanted to see you?
They told me to come Monday to Phoenix downtown, the police department, at 8:00 in the morning.
And they didn't offer to come to you?
Right.
Okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
And so, whoops. I don't know where Gary went. accidentally he hit a button. So when you hear about this, and when you hear about the manner of death, and you also learned about the house, that there was no forced entry, all the doors had been locked. I mean, at some point, right down
Right.
as things go, and that phones were submerged in dirty dishwater
Yeah.
in the dishwasher. Is that what you're saying?
No, there was no dishwasher. It was in a, she had fixed spaghetti, and they were in the spaghetti water on it. Somebody threw them in there, you know.
So her phones were in dirty water and
Yeah.
submerged. And then how did those details, initially right away, how did that hit you? What were you thinking?
I was numb. I mean, I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't stop. I had to go and get some medication, and because I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't stop crying.
Okay. Yeah. And no, and rightfully so. Right. I mean, those feelings are right in line with the tragedy, the horror that you're experiencing that
Yeah.
during that time, and even up to today. And again, this is, something to remind everybody, this pain never goes away. You learn how to adjust and move forward, but it doesn't diminish. But then you had additional pain added on to this in terms of her friend Melissa was also deceased, and
Yes.
Melissa had been pregnant, like Dr. Bricata was talking about. But so now this turns into a triple homicide. How knowing that, that there's an innocence of a baby involved in this, how did that affect you, and how has it affected you over all these years?
It's devastating. It is. I can't. Melissa wanted this baby. She was so excited about this baby, and I'm sure that whatever they were going through, she had to have told him that she was going to have this baby. And I don't know. It's really devastating.
Okay. Over the years, you've had a lot of media attention.
Yeah.
Has that assisted? Has it helped in any way?
Oh, I think so. Well, because there was a lady that had owned Clear Channel, and I had met her, and she had told me she would do what she could to leave it up there as much as possible. So like 8-9 years, there was it was the flat with the electronic billboards.
Yeah.
They were all electronic billboards, so it was seen by hundreds of thousands of people, really, on a daily basis, driving their car. And it was that way for years. But, it's tough to deal with. Even now it is.
Yeah. So let's talk about those frustrations. Okay. John and I want to help you maybe, get to a place where, God opens a window and you get a phone call from Senator Kelly's office. Just like, none of us have the ability to pick up a phone and call, the sheriff or the Phoenix Police Department or anybody like that, right? I mean, but other people can.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your senator, in my personal opinion, he just did it on a very high profile case there, Nancy Guthrie's case.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that tonight somebody in his office is listening and that he'll do it for your daughter.
That would be awesome.
And because this is a very interesting case that you have here, because we're going to talk about physical evidence that the authorities actually have, and that's DNA from biological fluid.
Right.
And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but it's been over 15 years, no arrest. what's that journey been like with, Phoenix PD?
Well, I feel in my heart of heart they wanted me to lose interest and go home and let it go. But they don't know me. I'm not going to let it go. I will never let it go. I will always advocate for my daughter and Melissa and her unborn child. This is horrific. Who knows what this person is out there doing now? I mean, to me, I think, how many more times have they killed? Because if they do it once, twice, 3 times, will they do it again? Probably.
Well,
That's what I think anyway.
you raise an interesting point, because killing somebody by ligature strangulation is not something that is done generally unless somebody is motivated by a very particular thing, a kind of perverse fantasy life where you need to do that for your psychology. And as a consequence, that type of offender does not tend to stop. Usually the mechanism of that type, strangulation, particularly with a device, it is so unnecessary if your goal is just to eliminate a person's life, that it reveals that the motivation must be fantasy based and sexualized in some way. It's not a coincidence. These are young women and so forth. One thing that I have said recently about a different Arizona case, the Guthrie case, that has made the rounds after I pointed it out, because I think it was a very sobering statistic, is that 92% of women who are killed knew in some way the person who killed them, which raises the question, could this have been somebody who knew them? Now, what makes it complicated is when there's a serial-like element to it, that's where you're seeing that 8% where somebody may not know you and may target you simply because they're attracted to you or interested in you in that way. But so that I think that we have to decide as a group, as we're talking about this, if we think this is more someone who knew them, which puts someone in that more 92% bucket, or if we think that the mechanism of harm was so serial killer-like, that we think they were just randomly targeted by somebody who had a perverse reason for attacking 2 young women like that. It's an interesting question to ask the group, but I agree with you 100% that somebody motivated that way probably has not stopped. And there probably are other offenses that one day could be linked, let's say through CODIS or something like that, that are currently unsolved. So that I commend you for not considering this a closed matter ever, because it could literally save lives, literally prevent someone from going on and doing this again. And believe me, this type will. So go ahead, John.
Well,
please.
I was just going to say, we may be able to take a step closer to whether it's 92 or 8 or the 8th percentile. Rachel mentioned that the telephones had been placed into basically a sink full of water, which would suggest to me that there was an effort to destroy data on the phone. Did you ever hear, which would then, and I know you 2 guys are already thinking what I'm doing, if you're destroying the phones, both phones, then the same name would appear on both phones. Did you ever hear from the Phoenix police whether they recovered data from the phones? I
understand that they had. I'm not sure what all data that they had gotten from the phones, but they also did a RIMN report, the Rocky Mountain Information Network. They did one of those as well. So there was a lot of, there was effort at that time. In the beginning, there was effort.
So for the audience, RIMN is the Western states. It's an intelligence network for law enforcement. Basically, everybody shares data into a single source, and then they push that out. What I want to do is balance out because I really believe, Rachel, what Dr. Mercado just said. you're living this moment by moment, day by day, minute by minute. I mean, literally. And I understand. You and I have talked, or, behind the scenes here. So I know exactly where you're at and in your feelings. And by the way, you have every right to feel the way you feel as a mother of your sweet daughter.
Yes.
So no matter what you say and how you say it, okay, I'm going to validate it on this side. Okay. So, but there are also many other mothers like you who are probably in the exact same position. And this is why I think you can empower them based on the type of questions I want to go down this lane. And forgive me up front, but I think it's important to understand the investigative process from your perspective as a victim's mom. And, we're going to kind of give a scorecard, for lack of a better term. We're not going to score it, but we'll give a scorecard to Phoenix PD. There had to be good days. There had to be quiet periods. There had to be bad days. And then there had to be extreme days and moments of absolute frustration. That's kind of a 3-part situation I want to break down. Help us understand what the good days were through your 15 years now with Phoenix PD. And then walk us through those periods where it got quiet and then it got bad and you got frustrated. And this is why one of the reasons we're here.
Well, what had happened, the initial detective that was on the case was pregnant, and when she went out on maternity leave, everything stopped. As far as I could see, I went down the police department. She went out in May of 2011, and I hadn't heard anything. I thought, God, is anybody working her case? What's going on? So I went down there after work one morning and said, I want to talk to the sergeant. And first he was in a meeting, didn't want to come to the phone. And then he finally, I said, I'll wait. And then he said, look, we don't have anything. We haven't had anything. Don't you call us, we'll call you. And I went, oh my God. What an awful thing to say to a grieving parent,
Did that feel like a tsunami coming at you?
Yeah, well, it was a knife to the gut, It was like, are you kidding me? I mean, I went out to my car and cried for at least an hour, just until I could compose myself when I could drive home after that. But it was awful.
Adding insult to injury.
Yeah. Oh, there's been plenty of that,
And at what time frame after you learned about Nicole did things start turning into the frustration side? And what were some of the good things though that you had hope? There was this hope of, okay, this is going in the right direction.
Well, that they had gotten DNA, and I was thrilled, like, yay, we got DNA. But
tell us about that. Walk us through that.
Well, first they said they didn't have DNA. Then they said that they did have DNA. So, then you're wondering, like, do you really, like, what's true and what's not true? Because there's a lot of miscommunication that goes on. I know that the detectives get frustrated and they get short because, they're human too. And, but it's really hard to deal with.
You're too sweet, Rachel. You are too sweet. You really are. Yeah, you're very diplomatic. That you're right. They are human, but at the same time,
they have a job to do.
I'm horrified by what I'm hearing, though.
Yeah, I am too. But okay, so you got an update. You got an update. DNA. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so what happened after this detective came back from her maternity leave, it was like the third week in September that I finally got a call from her. And the case never really got rolling. So at that point, I thought, hell, I'm hiring a private investigator. So I did. I hired him for a couple of years, actually. And then I had gotten some information that said that she may have been a confidential informant. Well, when I asked the police, was she or was she not, they wouldn't answer. And so
why was that important to you at that point, at that phase of where this was headed?
That may be a reason. It's like, come on, people, put your big boy pants on. Let's go. What are we talking about here? So, really frustrating. Really, really frustrating.
But subsequently, you found out what about that piece?
That she wasn't. When I took him to court, they said no, she was not a confidential informant, and neither was Melissa. So, so that's off the table. So, okay, get that off the table. Let's keep moving forward. What next? Well, they had told me that they were going to reach out to her friends, and then her friends of friends and friends of friends of friends. Okay, that wasn't done. So it was like, I felt like I was banging my head against the wall. That's why I hired a private investigator. But then the police wouldn't work with him. And it was not a good situation, I'll put it that way. But then after the thing with the CI, the private investigator went his way and we went ours. And really not a heck of a lot happened after that until October 19th, 2023. I mean, prior to that, I would go down on a regular basis, at least once a year to talk to the police where you at with this case. And then October 19th, 2023, when I came in, Sergeant Hillman was there and informed me that him and 3 other detectives sitting at a table said within 5 minutes of arriving that they were shelving her case. They said, we are not closing it, we're shelving it. And then he said to me, the only way the case will be solved if the person comes in and confesses to the crime. So basically tell me they weren't going to do anything else. Nothing.
And what had your PI discovered prior to that meeting for you?
Well, I didn't have him on board at that point. He was on board the first 2 years, but this is 2023. So that's, like 13 or 10 years, at least 10 years later.
So going back to what your PI may have found, what knowledge did he present to you about maybe some of the factual things that he had uncovered, or she? I don't know if it was a male or female.
Yeah. Well, what he did, whatever information that he had, he gave to the detectives.
Okay.
Because I said, look, even if they won't share with you, will you share with them? That because we need to try and work together, but they're not going to work with a private investigator.
Yeah.
So.
And so that information was shared. So that goes into the case file, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So those investigators are looking at that. They've got the stuff that the PI, even though they won't, it's a one-way street, it's
right.
And none of that's coming back. But were there any major revelations in the information that he had found?
Not really.
No suspect identification or anything?
Well, he had a couple of people, but I mean, at that point, he had taken it as far as he could,
okay,
without, interfering with the police, with their investigation.
That's what they said to him?
I wasn't there.
John?
For the first time in 2026, I'm speechless. That is troubling information. I wanted to loop back for a second also as far as the 92-8.
Yes.
The fact that they told you, Rachel, that they were serving a search warrant. And the reason why they would do that, and I don't know if you've gotten this into any depth, Chris, with the Mincy search warrant.
No, but go ahead. This is
The
great.
reason why you would do that is if you went to a homicide scene and there was any sense that the suspect, that the offender had dominion and control, who if the suspect had been there and had said, no, you're not searching my house without a search warrant. And curiously enough, it comes from a case in Arizona, Mincy versus Arizona. And we used to call them Mincy warrants.
Mincy warrants.
So if you went to a homicide scene and there was even the remotest chance that the offender was somehow had access to the home or could have claimed some ability to say, no, you can't search it, then you go out and get a search warrant. So in this instance, the acquisition of the search warrant tells me that the original investigators at the scene had some concern that the offender was known to these two poor women, perhaps had even stayed there on occasion and could have said, no, you can't search my house. So that's another thing I noticed from this.
Yeah, and the reason behind that, just to dovetail into what John's saying, Rachel, is, let's say the offender, is close to the inner circle of either, Melissa or Rachel, right? Or excuse me, Nicole, excuse me. And so if that is the case, had they not gotten the search warrant, any evidence that they would have collected at that time would have been thrown out as what they call fruit of the poisonous tree, because that individual had dominion and control. And under the Fourth Amendment, that individual then can say, well, that was my property and I didn't give you consent.
But that was Nicole's house. Why would they do that? That was Nicole's house.
Well, if the offender had been staying there, it could even be just for a period of a few days and not connected with Nicole, perhaps connected with Melissa, had stayed there for a couple of days, you would get the warrant so that you don't lose the evidence.
I see. Okay.
So it doesn't mean that the name has to be on the lease or on the deed.
Sure.
What it means is that somebody who might have stayed there might have been able to enter the house freely because he was close friends and there was a situation where the person had full run of the house. You don't want to lose the evidence, you go get the search warrant. But this again points the needle toward the 92% in my mind.
I'm sorry, Chris, please.
No, go ahead, Doc.
No.
Well, so one thing I find myself very curious about is who was the father of Melissa's baby?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and we're gonna. That's exactly the next segment or next piece that I want to plug in here, because I just want to kind of talk about Phoenix, right, and then we're going to go back to the crime scene and we're really going to digest the crime scene. I just don't want to get ahead of them.
I see. You want to go in a sort of meticulous order. Go ahead, please. But I'm sure that question will come up because I have no doubt we were all wondering.
Yes, no, I'm with you, and yeah, I'm watching the chat going, let's talk about the son. I don't want to do that yet because I want Rachel to be able to teach with authenticity other families that are going through this, who may be back in stage one of the good days. Okay. The good information, because now, the next piece of this obviously is we get to the quiet periods, which was, years and years and years. And then you get a phone call, walk us through that day. You got the phone call, come on down for the meeting. And then that whole meeting in 23 turns into this pressure cooker of frustration.
Yeah. Well, I actually called them because I wanted a meeting. Like, what are you doing with my daughter's case? Because, time is of the essence. I want this case solved before I die. I want justice for these girls. This is not right. This is horrific. But anyway, with the case, when we walked in on October 19th, they'd already had this plan how they were going to handle it, and then just shut us down. And this detective walked us to the door and said, "Don't lose hope." And I went, "Wow, already have." Just for a minute though, because I don't give up. I'm not giving up. I'll never give up until this is solved.
So you're in a profession where you, as a nurse, where you service people. I mean, you give service to people. You want to heal people, and you find yourself in the most difficult scenario of any human being on this earth: the murder of their child. And if investigators are listening to this, I want you guys to listen very carefully to what this mother is saying.
Have compassion for the family. Dig deep. Have a little compassion, because the way that it's been, basically spit out at us is it's ugly. It's mean. It's cruel. And, I'm glad I am who I am, because I will not take no. I will still I'm going to try another way. I'm not going to lay down for this. Our daughters deserve this. They deserve justice. So I'm not going to give up.
And again, I'm hoping that somebody in Kelly's office, if somebody in the chat can send this to him, that he makes a phone call to Rachel and he gets somebody motivated. Because there's also now, we're going to go on the upside, but before we get there, let's talk about, you said that they have DNA, correct?
Correct.
All right. Walk us through what information you may have about that DNA being processed and what you believe. We know it's biological fluid from a sexual assault on your daughter, correct?
Right.
And she was also strangled. And I know Gary's now his ears are going up. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
She was also strangled. Okay. And was Melissa strangled as well?
She was strangled, but not sexually assaulted.
And she was found in a separate room, correct?
Well, I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. I'm not really sure where I have a feeling where Melissa was, because when she was found, her Nicole's friend had went around to the back of the house because she couldn't get in through the front door. So she went around to the back. She looked through the window, and that's when she saw an arm, and that was Melissa's arm.
And have you spoken to Nicole's friend and she told you that firsthand?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What else did she observe?
Well, the way that the door was locked was unusual, because Nicole usually just uses the deadbolt, and the bottom lock was locked, but the deadbolt wasn't. So it was just one of those twist ones. So they twisted and walked out the door, I imagine.
Okay. What other inside information have you learned about your daughter's crime scene, the death of your daughter and her crime scene?
Well, she had been to Ross, which was close to her house, the day before, or the night before, and we found a receipt. And so I asked the detective, I said, if you want to go over and look at the video where she was, at the store at Ross, I said they have it, but they film over it every 30 days. They'll film over the previous VHS tape. And she said no. She said she didn't need to see it. So.
And this was the investigator who had come back from the maternity leave.
Well, she hadn't been on maternity leave yet. This was in the
Okay.
beginning, in the very beginning. Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So,
Help us understand any other details.
Well, I got a question, Chris. Were the people at Ross the last ones to see your daughter alive?
yeah. Yeah.
Kind of puzzling. You wouldn't want to see the video.
I know. She said, had she not come home, she would go and look. Otherwise, she didn't need to. So,
Okay.
and that was that. Unfortunately, her and I did not get along. And
Break that down for us. Help us understand that.
Please.
go down that road with
Yeah.
her, about
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She was sarcastic. There's no room for sarcasm in a situation like this. That's unacceptable. People that are going through this need to be dealt with compassion, not sarcasm. Not the boys club, which I call it, the downtown Phoenix Police Department. I feel like it is the boys club. Years that I had gone down there, I would take my brothers with me, and they wouldn't tell me a damn thing, nothing. So you feel like you're beating your head against the wall, but I'm still not going to give up. Justice needs to happen for her and Melissa and that baby.
Well, and for you and for your family.
Yes.
I mean, this is very important for the public and law enforcement to understand what cold case families go through. It's just not that you show up 15 years later on a podcast and you just talk about, the problems.
Well, I had even gone far up the ladder, tried to get to the chief of police, and I ended up getting to the captain. And he had her write me an email on a monthly basis to see what she had done to help solve the case. Well, all it was creative writing. It didn't say a damn thing. Nothing. It didn't say anything. So it was really frustrating. I finally told her after the third month, this is nothing but creative writing. Write me when you have something important to say.
Yeah,
So.
interesting. And I think it's, you just by what you just said, it's very important for investigators to create some type of liaison relationship with the victims' families.
Yeah.
And whether that's assigning a detective that calls Rachel, it doesn't necessarily, and because I think correct me if I'm wrong, but you would recognize if, hypothetically, this is the way I used to do it. Okay. Because we worked in a team setting. And if I was working with the victim's family, I would call them and say, hey, so-and-so, I'd like to come over and meet you. I'd come over, we'd sit down, we'd talk. And if you asked a question that I knew would compromise the investigation, I would always say to the family, well, I know you understand, if I give you that information, it potentially could compromise your daughter's death. And I don't believe that's where you would want to be. Is that correct?
Right. Correct.
And that's exactly the answer you get.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you follow it up with, on the other side of that, however, if we do get to a place, okay, where that information could potentially be available, I will also share that with you. But then I don't want to put you in a compromising situation with a defense attorney because we're getting close. Now, when the defense attorney puts you on the stand and says, Mrs. Glass said, did the detectives tell you anything? You can honestly answer no, but I understood why. And
right.
And and it sounds like none of that has ever occurred for you.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. It's been me knocking at their door, not them knocking on mine.
Okay, so this is a good segue into understanding maybe the mindset of the type of perpetrator that would have done what has been done here. to give you a better understanding, at least some sense of intellectual honesty for your family. Okay. And, I don't know how far down the road you want to go, or if you feel comfortable even going there and talking about it. This is about you and your daughter. So we all want to be sensitive here, but we also want to be honest with you and help you understand that what you may be talking about tonight, what John and what Gary have mentioned earlier, there may be other victims out there that you could potentially save. And so what are your feelings about wanting to go down that road?
Well, I've jumped in this far. I can swim. So let's do it.
Okay. And so in Police Work 101, we always talk about what the risk to your daughter is. Okay. And in this situation, she's at home, doors are locked. Sounds like there's no signs of forced entry. So she would be categorized as a low risk situation and victim. Okay. And I don't mean to desensitize it, by talking.
No, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. Because obviously Nicole counts, number one. However, this tells us a lot about the suspect and the suspectology. Okay. And so I'll throw that over to Gary and John. What are your initial impressions based on, not having the case file in front of us, obviously, but, what are your impressions?
Go, Gary.
You sure you don't want to start, John?
No, you go ahead, and I've got questions, but I would like to get a good solid foundation of your assessment just on the information we have.
Well, before I can begin to talk about it, it is important for me to understand the characters potentially involved. And that's why one of the first things I wanted to know is who was the father of Melissa's baby? Do we know?
Yes. Marquise Melvin.
And what was their relationship?
Boyfriend and girlfriend.
And he was happy about the pregnancy? They were looking forward to a future together, or had they separated, or did he
that's interesting. He apparently, allegedly, had told her family that. That's what her family told me, that he was excited about the baby and that. But Nicole's friends told me a different story. They said he wasn't. So
it's an interesting thing to sort of dog ear in terms of victimology and things, because when we try to understand a cold case or any case that we're asked to opine on, we go through these sort of filters in our mind of how we're thinking about it. And one of those is victimology, so that we have to understand why this person, what could. And believe it or not, a very common reason why men would target or eliminate a person that they knew is that the person has become pregnant. Now, I don't mean that to cast aspersions on Melissa's ex, but I just mean it's important to know in terms of data collecting the relationships that are at play here. And but the assault was of your daughter, correct? Not Melissa.
Right.
Now, what is interesting about that is this: when people are harming someone because they want to eliminate them because of a pregnancy or any other reason, they don't tend to do it in a way that requires a lot of extra, like strangling someone with a ligature. That's one of the things that starts to point to a more sexually perverse offender who is fantasy driven, unless you're trying to fake it to look like that. For example, in the infamous John Benet Ramsey case, the use of a garrote on the victim is one of the things that points away from the family. When people try to say a family member did it, which is nonsense, they're missing the point that you wouldn't use a garrote. So,
I don't know what that is. What's a garrote?
It's a strangulation device. a device that is used, right? So thank you. So the point is that in this case also, it's very puzzling why somebody who knows you would use that particular mechanism. That is a tool of sadistic assault. And now what's interesting is, as an expert on serial homicide and mass murder, I will tell you that the targeting of a victim where there is another victim at the same time in the same home or same setting is actually very, very rare. Usually a serial offender will, that will happen because they have a person that they're focused on who happens to be in a home where there are other people. And sometimes it happens because the person is more disorganized, like when Ted Bundy went into a sorority house intoxicated and was just randomly assaulting. But he did that because he had a target earlier that he was not able to obtain and became upset. To go into a home where there's more than one person like that, it usually means that one is the focus of the sexual assault, and the other one is there as a kind of bystander. So that
Collateral damage.
you could, well, I don't like to put it that way, but it tends to be that there's an assault on one person, the other one happens to be there, like you walk into another room and discover them. I think that's what happened, for example, in the Idaho murders, in the Brian Koberger story, if you're familiar with it.
Right.
Focused, right? So I think that one thing that you'd want to think about is that this might have been someone who had a sexual motivation in targeting Nicole and came into the home, and there was somebody else there who then needed to be eliminated without the sexual element because they were a witness or in the way or so forth. And if that is true, this is somebody who would do it over and over again. And the reason is that you are using a garrote or a strangulation device, a ligature, because you need that for your arousal for sexual purposes. That type of person does not stop until captured. They do not stop. Now, if this is somebody that knows her, and this is really where I want Chris and John to come in, is can you guys think of a case of a personal homicide, a personally motivated emotional homicide, where somebody would use a ligature to eliminate the victim, to kill the victim, where there's also sexual assault? That is very unusual. But because even if you were staging it to look like an outsider, you wouldn't do that. I think that points to sexual homicide of a generally serial nature and a sadistic person, and somebody probably who felt inadequate and rebuffed by what your daughter symbolized, because he would have seen her as a very attractive young woman who he might have been incapable of connecting with in ordinary life. So that I think that is part of the victimology, is that is how she would be seen by one of these societal losers that would be looking at her from the outside. Now, I'm curious what you guys think in terms of my point that really does seem to point more to being targeted by someone with a perversion. What do you think, Chris and John?
Well, I think it's really, to your point, it's very rare.
Very rare.
That one of the two victims was SA'd, okay? And right. That, to your thought process there, do you know the sequence? Have the authorities ever shared with you the sequence in relationship to who went first?
Great question.
They don't know.
Right.
That's what they shared with me. They don't know.
Okay, so they're not familiar with how that piece of the puzzle went down.
Did they share what the ligature was? Was there any indication? Okay.
They never shared that.
Well, and I would be surprised if they had. I was just grasping at straws there. So it is conceivable, if I'm dovetailing on Chris, is that one might have been one of the deaths might even conceivably by hours anteceded the subsequent deaths. There might have been a laying in wait there. Mm-hmm. The thing about it, I'm with you, Gary. The ligature is like a red flashing light. Because if it was just a straightforward elimination, and I'm sorry, I'm going to apologize right now, Rachel. if I sound kind of antiseptic here, like I'm not caring about your daughter or the other victim, but this is how we brainstorm these cases. And so I want to offer my apologies in advance if I'm coming across as being cold, because I'm not. We're trying to brainstorm this. It occurs to me that both of the events did not occur simultaneously because you have the issue of control.
Yep.
We also have no signs of forced entry, which suggests to me that the offender was acquainted with the home. And for all we know, even if it wasn't somebody that was in the home frequently, it might have been somebody that she saw at Ross the previous evening. There's elements of this investigation which, if are accurate, I find disturbing.
Well, and he could have been in there lying in wait in terms of in there with the first one, whoever
I mean, yeah, it's not as if we haven't seen evidence of this.
Yeah, and this is Nicole.
In stores.
He could have been waiting. Maybe he was in with Nicole, and because she's found in another room, and obviously there's no SA there. The real target here, then, or excuse me, this is Melissa.
Yes.
My bad again. Forgive me. But Melissa's number one, and then the real target here, to what Gary was talking about, becomes, Nicole, and that anger and the SA to her, and not the other gal, to, not lessen either one of them, but, to the family, to the Mason family. I think we should be talking about her and the fact that in terms of the totality of this thing, and that the fact that they were just roommates, maybe the suspect, obviously, would you guys agree that there's a familiarity with the location, right? We can all agree with that.
Absolutely. No forced entry, and the phones in the sink to me are just a huge point. This is somebody attempting to cover their trail.
Yeah, that was a good catch.
Right. And just because, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead, Gary.
Well, just because something smacks of a serial type offender doesn't mean that it precludes knowing the person. Sometimes, especially early in a series, a person who is escalating from a private perversion, a private life of using pornography or other perversions to move in that direction, can sometimes begin doing that, escalate to doing that for the first time with somebody that they know. And so you sometimes see a situation where a person has had a connection with you, they're feeling rebuffed or rejected, and then when it spills over to harming someone, you start to see the playing out of fantasies that are a way of compensating for feeling insecure or slighted or whatever through this power mechanism. You don't just wake up one day and decide you're going to do something like that with a ligature, excuse me. What you tend to see is somebody who has a long fantasy life in which women are subjugated or controlled or harmed in that way. So whether this is somebody who knows her in a passing way or knew her in a deep way or didn't know her at all, this is somebody who was probably harboring that kind of resentment toward women and then had a precipitating event like a rejection, being rebuffed, something like that, and then decides it's time to enact a fantasy. And I agree with John that what about the phones, and what's also very disturbing about it is it shows somebody who, even in the heat of doing something like that, was clear thinking enough to be thinking about avoiding capture, which suggests a reptilian, callous, cold, calculating kind of a person. And you take that chameleon kind of personality, right, and who used some kind of mechanism of getting close to someone only to take advantage of them later. So that makes this kind of person very dangerous and difficult to capture, because they could be slithering out in the world doing this over and over again. And it's also possible that this is a person who may not keep committing homicide, but maybe somebody who was committing serial sexual offenses where for some reason it escalated into death in this situation. Now, actually, the research tells us that in the kind of death that your daughter experienced, there are three possibilities. One possibility is that whatever was going on was supposed to just be a sexual assault, and it became out of hand and it caused death. That's possible, except the other victim was not SA'd. So that I really don't think that's what happened. It wasn't accidental like it could happen with some SAs. The second possibility is you've done that and now there are witnesses. And so in the same way you dunk the phone in water, you have to eliminate somebody who could talk. That's the second possibility. And the third possibility is that the strangling of the victim is part of the thrill for the individual, part of the SA, so that it's the killing itself that is necessary. Now, these are all deeply disturbing things, but we have to be open about them because I'm telling you that this happened a short enough time ago that if this person has not been captured, this is probably continuing. If you think of the average age of the type of person who probably did this to your daughter and her friend, you were probably looking at somebody in his 20s. And so you're talking about something like somebody who now would probably be what year was the crime?
35.
2010.
So you're looking at somebody who's probably in their 40s. I mean,
I
no
don't know.
reason to believe somebody like that would have
35
stopped.
to 45.
There's no reason to believe somebody like that would have stopped. And so now one other thing I wanted to ask you is, and again, forgive me because I agree with John and Chris about how sensitive we have to be here. I mean, this is your daughter, right? For God's sake. But so, and my heart, is really goes out to you. And I know what a good person you must be to put yourself through this for her. That really speaks a lot about you. But from the autopsy report, if you've ever gotten it.
No, I've read it. I
You
haven't.
have. Is there any
I have.
reason to believe that either of them were drugged or that had
No.
been hit in any way or anything like
The
that?
only thing that was in Nicole's system was a Benadryl. That was it.
And the other victim, no Benadryl?
Nothing. No, nothing.
Was there any other trauma?
Any trauma at all?
From what I saw, she had an abrasion on her leg. She had, they had cut her nails really short, like halfway down the quick. She had short nails anyway, but she had an abrasion on her forehead and her lip, I think, had been cut.
So did they interpret it that she might have put up a fight, or that?
Oh yes, they told me that she fought for her life. So both of them did.
Right. That is really very painful to hear.
So I'm leaning. Let's talk about two roads here for a moment.
Right, but we're thinking alike, I think.
Yeah, in the victimology aspect of this, I'm leaning obviously that the main situation here is Nicole. Yeah.
I agree.
And I mean, the extra situation that we're hearing about here is, I think it's starting to become clearer. So now they have DNA, as you've mentioned. Let's help the audience understand, Rachel, what the circumstances are around that DNA. Do you know of anybody, no names, but maybe just initials of individuals? Do you know if they've eliminated, let's do Melissa's circle. Have they eliminated people?
Oh, yeah. They have. There may be one person that is a person of interest, but that's it. That's all that they can deal with. And of course, they don't tell me anything else, but
sure.
This person had come to me a couple of days after she left, after she died. And he said, he wanted to know if I would honor their business agreements. And I went, what? And I just told him, no, not at this time. I can't. Yeah, I had too much going on. I can't deal with that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit more about that conversation, or would you rather not?
Rather not. I don't want to,
jeopardize anything.
my own life for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
Okay,
makes
we'll
it
talk
very
offline.
sexy.
We'll talk offline
Okay.
about that piece of the puzzle. Okay, so now what about the DNA in terms of, again, Melissa's circle? Have they cleared people out of that circle, i.e. the father of the baby?
Yeah, he was cleared. He also took a polygraph, and he was cleared of that as well. So
Okay, good to go. Who else had access to that home in terms of various people that the PD has taken off the plate, off the radar?
I don't know. I don't know that information. They don't share that with me.
But they said they have. Bring us up to speed with the most recent meeting that you guys had. You had a meeting, if my understanding is correct. Okay, walk everybody through that.
We communicate by email at this point because there was some information that was called in January of 2025, which actually got the case going again. Information on a particular person, and that's what got the case going again, because somebody called into Crime Stoppers, and because from 23 to 25, I didn't have any information because he had shelved her case.
Yeah, so, walk us. So this latest information, and we don't have to name the state, but the individual's out of state.
Yes. So they went there and got this person's DNA.
Okay.
And I'm still waiting on that to be processed because it's not processed yet.
Okay, so let's talk about that. This is something that I think Senator Kelly can pick up the phone and make happen.
Yeah.
Walk the audience through what you've learned and who you've had conversations with, and how we can help you expedite this.
Well, the detective had called me and said that they'd received through their investigation reporting that they had another person was identified, and they went out of state and took that person's DNA. And I went, great, But he said, we're not going to have results for a year, at least a year. And so I still reach out to him every month and say, any progress, anything,
Well,
no.
They wouldn't have to send that through IgG. If they have DNA and they got a buccal swab, they should be able to turn that around probably in 3 months, 4 months. I mean, you just heard the sheriff in Pima County said they have a rapid DNA at Phoenix Police Department. And there are 2 machines out there. One of them is called Andy. And it's a rapid DNA machine that literally within 4 hours, you can say if this person's within the box or not.
Oh my God.
Right.
Oh, wow. Well, that's
remember the Sheriff Nanos said his machine was down, but in the Nancy Guthrie case, he sent it to Phoenix.
Well, Chris, I'd like to know why there hasn't been a look at familial connections.
Great point.
Right.
Great point.
Well, that's something that I talked to the detective about. If this doesn't pan out, I said, what's the next step? Familial DNA? And he said, yes. So I know that that's on the table still.
Okay, but they can nail it down to whether or not they're going to put this person in the circle or out of the circle.
Right.
And it doesn't take a year to do that.
He told me it's backlog. You said we're dealing with the older cases first. So
Lines are made to be broken, Rachel.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, you have been waiting a very, very long time. What kind of media coverage? I mean, you've had Dateline, you've had all kinds of other folks look at this, correct?
Oh yeah.
Walk us through that. Educate the audience on that type of stuff.
Well, every chance I get, anybody that would be interested in doing a story, I would go for it. You know, when I was working nights, anytime they had space, especially hopefully it would be before the end of my drive home. But I said, look, if you've got space, put me on there, and I would beg people to, if you know something, say something, call silent witness, give their number, and in the beginning. But then, after time, nothing moved.
Yeah, and that's these billboards that were put up all around.
Yeah.
For the two girls.
Yes.
Chris, is it okay if I ask something?
Yeah, Gary, of course.
So, just as I had in my notes that Melissa was 8 months pregnant, and you say it was 2, I may have other information that's incorrect. And there's one important thing I want to understand before we progress from the snapshot of victimology. So I have in my notes, because I keep extensive records of homicides. And what I have is that your daughter and her friend were actually working as bartenders. Is that correct?
Correct.
And one of the settings, and I don't mean it in an insensitive way, but it's important to understand, is that one was a kind of a strip club setting. Is that true? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I think it's important because it gives you an idea of the kind of people that they might have been encountering. For example, strip clubs are a common setting in which sexually motivated people are lurking to sort of play out Lord knows what in their minds.
Right.
Because, or for example, places where you might have sex workers that are coming around. And I think, as sensitive as the topic is, it is important to understand that they were swimming in a pool filled with piranhas in that way, right? I also think it's important to point out that probably, and I think Chris and John would agree with me, whoever did this is a local. I don't think this person came from some other town passing through to do this. The reason that's important is that with this comment that someone made about there being more recent cases, I don't know how anybody knows that these recent cases are not tied to the same person who committed an old case, because this person, whoever did this, is swimming around probably using the same old methods, getting away with them. And I mean, what do you guys think, Chris and John, about this point about that figures into the victimology, that they were working, in a setting filled with people motivated in that way?
Yeah, I mean, but there's two, right? There's with inside those environments, there's no question that is a high risk environment. It's right.
Yeah.
It has to be a consideration.
Not meant as victim blaming. Let me emphasize that.
No, I get it.
Yeah, but to your point, maybe the investigator had a certain bias in relationship to, they work at a club. Okay? I mean, John and I mean, we had X-rated movie theaters, we had strip clubs, we had, in our careers, trust me, everywhere around us, we had all the stuff. Okay. But to be a bartender in that environment versus up on the stage, those are two type of girls. Okay. And I know that because I was a vice investigator from 1984 to 1986. And I used to work with both types of girls. You could go to the bartender and she would tell you, hey, you got to keep an eye on that guy. Okay. You could go to the girl up on the stage running around the pole and she'd go, oh, he's a great guy. He's my friend, Hank. Okay. Because he gives me $40. Okay. So, but to your point, the fact that Nicole and Melissa both worked in that environment, again leans back towards, okay, is that a possibility to a contact point? I think that's where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone
Is
sees her, finds her attractive, maybe a little intoxicated, is
right.
feeling rebuffed, uses the
Right.
schmoozing, chameleon technique to maybe go home with her and get let in the front door, that kind of thing. Because that type, they lurk in those environments. They see them as a fishing hole for doing whatever it is that they intend to do. And,
Right.
and your daughter, she was a conspicuously attractive young woman who was working as a bartender and created a setting in which a stranger had a reason to come up and talk to her.
Which
And
is the next question. Was she actively working in that environment when her life was taken?
Good question.
No, she stopped because of school.
Okay. How long before?
You know what? I'm not sure, to tell you the truth, because she was a pretty busy girl, didn't have a lot of time to.
And
Did she have
then
any
you have
problems with her friends at school, with the people she attended school with?
No, she did. It was at University of Phoenix, so a lot of it was online. So it's not like
Okay.
she got the classroom thing.
yeah, and then we have Melissa who's pregnant.
Yes.
Right.
And so that, I don't see, and forgive me again, but you we're just kind of brainstorming. I don't see pernicious. I don't see these girls saying, "Hey, come on over to my house.
Right.
Let's hang out for a night." Now, is that a possibility that he could have stalked them and have crossed to your point, Gary? I agree with that one. I could run on that for a little bit. Okay. But I would also expect that person to be in CODIS more so than anybody else.
Oh yeah, and I mean, imagine a person who, despite destroying the phones, leaves semen.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about somebody who, as an afterthought, thinks to clean up the scene and has done something as impulsive and stupid as that, and which shows that this is a person who can be calculating and cunning, but in the final analysis is a sort of impulsive, sort of animally driven type of person who's screwed up. And I think that it's probably true that this person would light up in CODIS if they're not incarcerated.
Right.
Yeah.
He's out there, doing what, probably still doing this.
Right. So that narrows down our scope.
Yes.
Right. The fact that this individual is not potentially in CODIS because evident the fact that Rachel's getting stonewalled here. And in terms of, time, it takes they're not going to cut the line, for lack of a better term. Okay. I really believe though, Rachel, they can, push this thing pretty quickly with enough pressure from folks like, your senator, or you have two senators, but in that area, but you have Kelly for sure, because we know he already has, picked up the phone for, other gripping disappearances there
Right.
in that area, and the fact that here you are, a mom fighting for justice for over 15 years. Okay. What goes through your mind when you've seen some of the intense national coverage? And I'm not saying that it's a tit for tat. Obviously, you're both, both families are victims of horrendous events. But what goes through your mind when you see one event getting more coverage than the other?
Well, I don't begrudge. Let's talk about Guthrie. Okay.
Sure.
I don't begrudge that family getting the attention. I say good for you, but it needs to be fair and equitable, because there's plenty of other cases that need the attention too, and you don't get it unless you're on TV. I mean, it's hard to swallow. It's very hard to swallow.
Yeah.
Watching the disparity in hearing somebody say, well, you can't cut the line. How's that make you feel? Does it make it harder?
Oh, heck yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, you know what? I try not to take it personally when they say that, but it is personal. It's my daughter. It's my baby. And, I will fight until I take my last breath for her. She deserves that.
Absolutely. It must feel like you're shouting into a void.
Yeah, pretty much.
You must have been worried about her all the time with the world she was in with that work.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I cried when I found out that she was working in a strip club. I was like, oh my God, you know.
Did she
So,
ever call you up and say, I had a creepy run in today, or some guy wouldn't leave me alone, or
oh no, she wouldn't tell me that because she'd know I'd flip out. She knew that her mom would flip out on that one. But I had never even been in a strip club until she'd called me one time and she said that asked me to bring her food and I did. She was working and
yeah.
but
Well,
that
yeah. Well, but I guess what I'm getting at is, and forgive me if you had something more to say there. Did you have something else that you wanted to add? Because I'm
no
glitching out, and I think I might have cut
no
you
no.
off.
Go ahead.
I think that there may be something to this idea of somebody who saw your daughter and kind of fantasized about her and became a little locked in on her because she was in a setting that draws a certain type of. Now, not everyone who goes to those settings is like that,
Right.
but it can also be a kind of breeding ground for fantasy-driven people in the same way that pornography can be.
Okay.
And what I envision is a situation where someone probably was looking at her and feeling that she was symbolic of or emblematized a certain type of woman that they couldn't have, that they were going there to fuel this fantasy world and locked in on her. Somehow, in some way that I don't understand, this chameleon figure probably found a way to get into that home setting because there's no sign of having broken in. And
Right.
so you have to picture somebody like a wolf in sheep's clothing or a something like that. And I don't you guys think? I mean, the fact that there's no forced entry, it points to a kind of a liar, a serpent, that looks different than he is. And I think that person would have very abruptly turned on her once she was isolated somewhere, because an organized offender is either going to hit you to get you to an isolated place, or they're going to go with a person who is a sex worker where the person will isolate with you on purpose, or they're going to lie to you to make you feel comfortable to isolate. But the reason for the isolation is they need privacy to play out the fantasy. And it sounds like this person got her there to the home environment and then would have turned on a dime. And the real question is, did they pick up something to use as a ligature, or did they have something in their pocket or bag? Because with a fantasy-oriented person, a repeat offender, there's a very specific thing you need to do. But some people will just pick something up, a bed sheet or a phone cord or something else, phone charger or something like that they'll use. That's why the question that Chris asked, actually I think John asked about what the ligature was, is so important in terms of getting an idea of if this was part of the plan from the get-go. But I think that, especially given that there was sexual assault, it's very hard to escape that was the purpose of doing this. And that the fact that it has been met with such, I don't know how to put it, a kind of a dismissiveness, feels to me almost as if someone is experiencing a failure of imagination of how dangerous it is to have this character walking around out there. I mean, we know this character. We know this type, and everything that I've just described to you makes this person a machine of being able to do this over and over and over and over and over. And so I appreciate the urgency with which you're talking to the public, because I don't believe someone in his 40s would have stopped unless incarcerated or dead.
And there was where I was going to go. He's either in prison and there was no CODIS, or he's dead.
or he's dead. One of those two. He's either out there doing it again, in prison, or dead. One of those three.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a
What do you
that's
think, Chris? Yeah, I mean,
no,
do you-
I that's why we want Rachel here, because
Right.
she deserves to have, you know, the legacy of her daughter, that, you know, Nicole's memory comes around every anniversary. I mean, her would-be birthdays. I mean, all of the situations, you know, she would have been, you know, 40 plus now at this
43.
stage, right?
Yep.
And these are daily life, Gary. I mean, you deal with
Oh, yeah.
Rachel's all day long.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, but what they're asking for is, you know, what does justice look like for them? And when you have, you know, to Bo Kelly's moment ago, you know, saying, I wish the president would have called, you know, as well as, you know, the Kelly making phone calls. Yeah, we agree with all of that. We agree with all of it. Okay. What the irony, though, is this is a mom who's sitting across from an investigator and saying, we're not cutting the line. Okay. Well, that's a long line based on the statistics that I laid out in the very beginning
Yes.
about, you know, how many unsolved homicides are in that area. Okay. Well, that line may not come in Rachel's lifetime, and that's what she's asking for. And so if the politicians want to get involved, then get involved. But let's figure out how we shorten that line. There are thousands of labs around the United States that, if the right money was spent and folks went to their legislators and said, look, we have, and let me give you the Phoenix statistics, 2,400 unsolved murders. And you just pull out of that bucket what the DNA, who they have DNA, you know, of these cases on these victims. You know, if we take those numbers and we just add parents to that, okay, now we have 4,800 parents on top of 2,400 victims. Now we have 7,200 people that are waiting for justice. And the numbers just keep going. They just keep exploding.
Right.
Okay. And to sit, I would have never said to a victim's family, and John, I know, you know, keep me honest here, because I know you wouldn't have either, or Gary, I know you would never do this.
No.
You don't ever say to a victim's family, well, you know, you're just going to have to get in line.
Right.
You know, you can't cut the line. We can't cut the line. Okay. I don't think you were asking to cut the line. You've been waiting 15 and a half years almost.
Right.
Okay. What line did he mean or she mean? Right. And then now that they know they have information, and then you start seeing this massive, you know, influx of, you know, high powered, high profile celebrities coming in and going, hey, I called up my friend who's a senator, your senator, by the way, your senator, and she didn't have to wait in line.
Right.
We did a show on this recently. We cannot have a two-tiered system in this country. It just can't be done. And so everybody can be together. I don't want to see a line like this where we're all standing behind each other. I want to see a line like this where we're all standing next to each other.
Exactly.
Right? Because at some point, if Nancy Guthrie is never found and she's deemed maybe a homicide victim, well, guess what happens? Savannah gets in your line.
Right.
Okay? You've been in this line 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it time that we as a culture and as a society take away lines and start working for humanity and empathy and moving things forward? And, you know, right now, I know the smallest detail, any detail could really help in your case, and I know there's a reward through silent witness out there.
Mhm.
It's about almost 8,700, 13,000. Is that still standing?
8,700 plus. There's another about 2,500 in GoFundMe.
Okay.
As well.
That money alone could pay for the DNA to be run
Right.
against the guy up in the other state. That right there could, if it becomes, well, we don't have the money and all this other stuff. Well, guess what? You do have the money. It's sitting right there in the reward fund.
But they won't do that. They won't.
Right. That's the point.
Yeah.
Right. That's the point.
Right.
And trust me, we run into this. Gary and I are both in the Cold Case Foundation. We hear this all the time around the country. Okay.
Yeah.
Where families are saying, well, the police have the DNA, but they won't, they can't process it. Well, that is why I hope Senator Kelly calls you and says, Miss Glass, and then calls Nicole's parents and say, let's have a meeting and let's figure out how we can do a national database or something, or a national lab network that the federal funds will pay for labs that are certified around the country to not necessarily identify the suspect, but get a profile. That's what you need. You need a DNA profile to
Right.
match it up against the profile that the lab has already done. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. And there are a lot of certified labs around the country. And I know Phoenix had some problems recently with some of their DNA labs over there, and as did Colorado. But
That's extremely interesting.
Go ahead, Gary.
No, I'd say that's extremely interesting to hear that. And we have in our foundation one of the top authorities on DNA in the world, Francine Bardot. I mean, the woman has been capable of doing things like getting DNA off submerged rocks and things like that. Extraordinary. But one thing I want to make absolutely sure I say, based on what I'm reading in the chat. So is that okay, Chris? I just want to say something very quickly.
Sure, of course.
So when I'm a visiting scholar at Boston College, and I do research there with Dr. Burgess, Ann Burgess, a very well-known authority. They made that show Mindhunter about her and John Douglas's work with offenders, and Victor Petreka is also there. And Dr. Petreka had a grant to study cases of strangulation, and we have studied it. And, one of the things I can tell you from reviewing that literature and from our own work is that in those cases, when it is not done by a serial offender, a person committing serial sexual homicide, the likelihood is that it's actually part of domestic violence. And that's the other important thing we have to think about, because this is a situation where there's nobody who broke in and so forth, is that somebody could be in a relationship with you and is so controlling, so violent, that they can assault you sexually if they feel rebuffed, strangle you, and so forth. So that a possibility that has to be kept on the table is that she had become involved with some unsavory person and didn't tell anybody about it, and that person was committing a kind of domestic violence. Now, I'm telling you that based on the statistics, it is more probable, leaning in the direction of a stranger who's committing sexual assault, who's been let in because he's a chameleon. But you do have to keep on the table that there was a secret relationship with an unsavory kind of guy who was a control freak who did this. And the other thing is, I can tell you, which is very interesting, is that 50% of victims of ligature strangulation do have marks on them like your daughter did. And those are usually done before the person dies. So the idea is that there's a fighting or there's an argument that is erupted, and the person, in an effort to control you, picks something up and then, and I think what it looks like is that that's happening in people where either it's part of the fantasy to hurt you, or there's a situation where the person's angry that they can't get you to do what they want, so they pick something up and they sort of use it to hurt you and then strangle you. So I think that those are two possibilities you have to bear in mind. The other possibility being this unknown character that she had an involvement with. And if that's the case, that's the type of person who would move on to the next relationship where they are being violent with the next person. Either way, no matter how you slice it, you're talking about something where some local guy is doing something that someone's going to recognize. I mean, somebody is having that experience in the same area, probably.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, from the investigative point of view, is gold when you realize it. That somebody out there's probably scared to say it. But I mean, what do you guys think, John and Chris? Don't you agree? I mean, this stuff, one way or the other, this is happening again, and probably not too far away from where Nicole and Melissa died. But you tell me. I mean, you guys are on the investigation side.
John?
Yeah, you're looking for local. You are not.
Right.
And I found it fascinating, the point you made regarding the possibility of the relationship.
Right.
And that was going to be a question. Were you aware? Was she in a relationship? Had she had a relationship that broken up?
No.
Okay.
Well, this is the type of person, unfortunately, if she did, it's the type of person who would say to you, you don't tell anyone anything about this. I tell you who to talk to, etc., because those type of people alienate you from loved ones precisely because they're predators. And they'll tell you, don't listen to anybody. They're going to lie to you because you worry that someone is going to say the person you're involved with is a jerk. Get away from him. So I think one of those two things happened. I really do. I'm confident that one of those two things is likely. But the point is that because both of those things involve someone with a character structure where you would just be like that statically, and I think this person's local, there are other women in the area who have probably had run-ins or experience with this person who might recognize, especially if there was detail on the mechanism of death. Like, that's odd. The guy I was involved with, who I left because he was monstrous, used to use that same kind of ligature on me sexually, or, would threaten me with it, or so forth. It's very important to know that, because when it comes to fantasy, it's very specific. Very specific. I'm aware. I just looked at a case, for example, of someone who could only commit homicide by ligature strangulation using a stocking of a very particular color. I mean, that's how specific it gets. You see what I'm saying? Right.
Yeah.
Because unless it's a DV situation where you pick something up or it happens abruptly, you're probably bringing something with you that is necessary for that arousal. And you've fantasized about it a long time. So Chris and John, do you agree with me that understanding what the item was would be extremely important?
Yeah, that's critical. But here's my challenge with that, Gary. Just to not.
Yeah, tell me.
My challenge with that is you have two victims.
That's right. Both strangled that way.
So I take domestic violence and put that in the second category.
That, I think it's less likely than the first, but can't be taken off the table. Right. That as a.
Yeah. But I definitely would keep it on the table. But at the same time, the fact that they're the suspect took the phones, put them in water, knowing that gives what John was talking about. Okay, well, what was inside of those phones? And so those the suspect was in those phones. I think obviously because that individual, you would think, right? I mean, that would be a logical conclusion that. So there is, that's the linkage with both of the victims. That is one of the linkages. The second piece would be, okay, what would have been the contact site? And the contact site obviously could have been their old working environment potentially. So then you would want to try to see if there's a circle somewhere. Does the suspect, is he doing this, between both girls and going back and forth? And are there, I would have interviewed everybody down in her work environment. And I would have said, help me understand, give me that one guy that, is just that guy.
Yeah, you look at him and you get the smell of sour milk from a carton. You
Right.
just you know there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then try to see if there's a correlation somewhere between that guy, what nights that person shows up and that kind of thing. Okay. Because remember, bartenders are natural at reading people. They're with people all day long, and they're like hairdressers. If you want to know anything about right, or nurses and or teachers, right?
Right.
You guys have they have this, and women, you have this natural ability to go, that guy. We have to learn it. I tell people all the time, even my wife, we had to learn that sixth sense, and the street teaches us how to do that. But women have it. You have that gift, and I could see both of these girls just trying to put my mind into their environment of going, you know what? Watch this one, and the two of them going, yeah, I know, I noticed that. Okay.
Right.
And this, okay. I can't see them saying, oh, and by the way, here's my number, put it in your phone. I think that, to your point, now going where I was headed with this, Gary, to your point, this idea of saying, how do you get so close to both of these victims
Right.
that you end up into their phone? Okay.
Well, did they interview the people that were associates of the father of the child?
Great point.
Oh, yeah.
We could assume if he's in the residence, he may have brought friends.
Yeah.
So
He
that
wasn't
would,
there.
but again, we're speculating at this point whether they followed up on that.
Yeah.
Well, John raises a very interesting point. There are cases in which more than one offender is the reason why two very different things happen to two different victims. And there are cases that are called secondary felonious assault cases, where somebody is in there to do one thing, and then because there happens to be a young woman there that is the victim, they take advantage and they sexually assault the victim, which wasn't the original intention. The thing is, if you're going to do that, you're not going to use a ligature to strangle somebody, which takes a while. You would do something
4
like
minutes at a minimum. It requires 4 minutes at a minimum.
it takes at least 4 minutes. Right. It's so that the idea is that you wouldn't do it that way. That's something where the reason that strangulation is favored, and forgive me, I it's very hard to talk about this in a sensitive way. So stop me if I'm being insensitive. But the thing is, the reason you would choose strangulation for sexual reasons is precisely that it's protracted, is that the person can enjoy the experience longer. Every other way of doing it is something that is very fast. So the whole idea is that it is favored by a sexually motivated person, because you're talking about minutes of that experience of domination and control. And that is why I'm very inclined to think that whatever went on here, sexual acts, that is to say, was a mechanism of control and domination in this individual, and that is not going to go away. This is not probably a married guy with kids. This is not that type. I don't think so.
I'm going to be surprised if there's not more victims, seeing how he's already got to the top of the mountain.
Definitely not. And I think that this is a person who probably went to that strip club and did a lot of sitting and staring at the women, things like that, because sexual stuff as a form of domination is very important to this type of character. And, look, I've talked to a lot of sex offenders that have gone to places like strip clubs. When they're sitting and staring at you and they're giving you money and all of that.
Remember, this is a family show. Don't
I know. I'm trying to watering it down. Okay. But the point is that having talked to offenders like that, they can experience a godlike thrill at the idea that they're sitting there and watching you like from a perch or up on a stage or something, and that you have no idea what they're thinking about when they're looking at you. That can give the person a sense of control, because I'm paying for it and you're doing it. It's a mechanism of, and I think whoever this is, I think this character has had a lot of problems with relationships with women, is probably not in any kind of meaningful relationship, and probably has a major temper with women in addition to a perversion. And
Right.
I mean, this, especially if you're the type of guy spending a lot of time in a strip club, which you may have been, chances are you don't have anyone who's going, "Where are you going tonight? Why are you not staying home?" That kind of thing. You got to
Yeah.
picture a loner who is very angry at women and is looking for a setting in which they have to look at him. They have to look at him because he's paying. See,
Yeah.
and that, do you guys agree that's the type of character we're dealing with? That kind of social loser, right?
I think that guy is on the table, but again, I go back to,
Yeah.
our an investigative experience where you go, okay, well, wait a minute. In a domestic violence situation, one of the first places they're going to go is towards the neck. Okay. In fact, when John and I were on the streets years ago, there were no studies on that stuff.
Yep.
Okay, until women started saying, "Hey, wait a minute, and they started seeing correlation, and et cetera. And that's when California changed their laws. It went from DV, can you go that way? Can you go that way? Okay, everybody have a good night. Good night. And now it's mandatory. The penal code section was 273.5. You got to hook them up.
Somebody's
Okay.
going to jail. But
So-
we're old enough that we remember before there were domestic violence laws.
Right.
Right.
Right. And so now then I say, okay, the reason I come at this question from that perspective is because you have two types of customers in looking for their victim. You have the customer that sits there and he watches the girl up on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you have the customer that comes in there and says, "Hey, give me a beer. Okay. What's your name?"
Right.
The suave one, the chameleon.
The chameleon. Right. Okay. And so that diplomacy of that suspect makes him more dangerous
Much
initially because he is able to conceal it and he's able to say, "What's your phone number? Give me your number." Okay. And you women out there that are listening tonight, please tell your grandchildren, your daughters, yourself, don't give your phone number out to anybody on these apps or anything like that. No way, Jose, don't do it, please. Okay. Don't do it. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but this is a situation. I think the suspect was extremely comfortable. Again, we go back to, in this environment,
Forced entry.
no forced entry. They were like, "Oh yeah, come on in.
Mhm.
Okay. Good to see you. What's going on? How are you? Okay. Well, you owe me."
Any ransacking? There's no evidence of a secondary crime such as burglary
Well,
being taken?
what was going on at her house at the time when she was murdered is she was having the floors done. So all of her furniture, everything was pushed to the back part of the house. So there was only a couple of couches and a TV in the living room. That was it.
But
And did
one
they
thing-
talk to the work crew doing the work?
Oh yeah, they did that. They did the polygraphs.
Did they eliminate them through DNA?
No. I shouldn't say that. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think that they did, but
Well, I can tell you from experience of looking at other cases, in my notes and everything, that sometimes when you get rid of the phone and there's no forced entry, it can be because the person who did it was like a delivery person or somebody that you contacted and then you opened the door and then they forced their way in and do what they do. For example, remember the Charles Bronson movie Death Wish?
Yeah.
In that movie, the idea is that three people overhear a mother and her daughter at a D'Agostino store giving their address for a food delivery, and then go to the address, pretend to be the delivery people. The door opens and they go in and they assault the victims and assault the victim and kill the other. And so in a situation like that, I could see you getting rid of the phone also. The person who inveigles their way in that way, like a food delivery person or something like that. I mean, you guys, Chris and John, you're aware of that old ruse too, obviously, right? You've seen cases like that. So I don't think that could also be taken off the table, like a predator that is using that kind of ruse But I still think that, Chris, you're on to something, that the key to this is that it is the mechanism of getting into the home. Because if you're a smooth talking chameleon, that is a very different type of offender than a kind of brusque, kind of socially inept guy who can only use violence to dominate and control. Because remember, the smooth talking is another type of domination. That's something else you're enjoying, is that you fooled someone that into letting you into the house, like a vampire does, that kind of thing. And so one way or another, I mean, don't you guys agree? I mean, that this is a deeply predatory character.
Well, I mean, and you have to, a sequence would be really important to understand, because if we were to say that Melissa was the target and
Right.
he was interrupted by Nicole,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now she's going to get the majority of, the hate. But then if we sequentially turn it around, if Nicole is the target and he's in there already, okay, and he's, taken her life and done whatever was done. And let's say then at that point, does Melissa interrupt it? And now she gets his hate, but it's only, I don't need to do anything to her because my target was Nicole. And now he's running up against time, a la Brian Koberger coming downstairs with 2 victims that are left alive. He runs out of time. Okay. But so I think this individual was known to both of the girls. I agree with John and Doc that, that this was a very personal situation that could have been planned for quite some time through a fantasy, because there is an SA element to this. Okay. I think the anomaly here is the fact that Melissa wasn't SA'd. And so that shows more personality towards Nicole. It's somebody in Nicole's circle of influence more so than Melissa's.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you were to if the investigators have flushed that piece of the puzzle out, the fact that they have now maybe done most of that or a lot of that, and maybe they have a certain name that is, surfaced that, okay, yeah, this guy was more so, obsessed with Dr. Mercado's talking about, more obsessed with Nicole versus, Melissa. I think the Mason family, deserves those answers as much.
Absolutely.
For justice and, to move the situation. So in closing here tonight, I think we need to understand for these 2 young ladies who will forever be 27 years old.
Yeah.
I think what we need to do as a YouTube community and as a true crime community is get this into the hands of Senator Kelly and have them advocate for Rachel. I make a promise to you, Rachel, we're going to stay on your daughter's case here. And I give you an open, extended invitation at any time you want to come and talk about your daughter on this channel. You have an open invitation to do that. Okay?
Thank you.
And
I've got a question, Chris.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Rachel, do you have access to the documents from the private investigator?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Would you be comfortable sharing them with Chris and the rest of the group?
We can talk about that offline. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to front you off here on the air, but
It's okay.
that just occurred to me, and I'm old, and if I don't say it right away, I will forget it.
That's a great idea. And one thing I would add in closing is that if this were a fresh case, one of the things, if I were asked to consult on it or give some ideas, I would have suggested is talking to local sex workers. And the reason is that that type of offender tends to play stuff out with people that they are paying. And those women will remember somebody who is asking them to do things that are a little too rough or inappropriate or so forth, because this person needs to fuel this somehow, one way or another. And Chris, I mean, you know how these things escalate and how it needs fuel. It's one of the reasons that on this show we have such a stance against so much of this stuff that degrades women, like pornography and things like that, because it's a fuel. You know, the engine for this type of offender needs fuel, fantasy fuel. And unfortunately, another mechanism of that is sex workers. And so I mean, wouldn't you guys agree, Chris and John, that probably some local women in that world have probably had some run-ins with this character?
It wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't
No,
surprise. Let's put it that way. It
wouldn't
tends to be the
either.
case. Right. Because, you know, yeah. So, but I don't know if it's too late for that, you know, that kind of situation, but it would have been something to do at the time. But the DNA here seems to be the key, Chris.
The key, it will solve this case if they're confident enough that they have a profile.
Yeah.
Okay. And now they're just looking for a secondary profile to match it. What I find disturbing that was said to Rachel was the fact that she had to get in line. Okay. The line begins the moment you get, I mean, think about this, right? If we all think about it, just because it's not in CODIS, right, doesn't mean the case can't be solved. Okay. As John said earlier, I mean, we never had DNA. We didn't have, what's DNA?
Right.
Okay. And I mean, that stuff didn't start kicking in, okay, until the mid 90s and even then it was being challenged. Okay. It's knock on a door. Let's talk. Can we have a conversation with each other? And it was it was this, the ability to sit down with the victim's family and say, tell me about Nicole. And then you would do the same with, you know, Melissa's family. Tell me about Melissa. And by the way, they have an open invitation to come here as well to share their daughter's story. Okay. Because both stories are intertwined. Okay. And then from that point forward, you start doing what you do. And you work it from when the evidence comes back. You look at the photographs as much as you can. You learn that scene up here. You live it. You feel it. You smell it. You taste it. And then you immerse yourself. And you never forget the victim's family. You turn around to somebody on your team and you say, you know, if it was John, he'd say, Chris, you got the family. And I sit down with the family and we go through that conversation that we had earlier on in this conversation tonight. And that's why this is an extended invitation for you at any time. And you know, your husband, because you're living it. We're talking about it, but you're living it. You have, and by the way, Josephine is an amazing human being.
Yes, she is.
Isn't she? I
Yes,
mean, she chased that guy all around the world. Okay.
She certainly did.
And you know what? You're going to do the same. And we're going to help you. We're going to help you stay on that track of that as that train goes from a slow, you know, maybe throwing coal, okay, to a bullet train in Japan. And let's see how fast we can get this thing going.
That would be awesome.
Okay, rule number 1, though, is we got to get Kelly to make the same phone call he made for Savannah Guthrie. Okay. I mean, all he has to do is call Phoenix and say, do you guys have a rapid DNA test down there? Yes. Okay, Miss Glass deserves it. Make it happen. Okay. That's the least he can do. And maybe he can bring him a box of donuts, okay, and some milk
Coffee.
and coffee. and walk in and say, here's your donuts, milk, and coffee on behalf of Rachel and Nicole and Melissa. Okay. Make it happen. And you know what? I want you to come back and keep us posted.
I will.
And because I'm going to make sure that I'm going to keep him posted. If you're going to walk the walk, you need to talk the talk. That's how it should work if you're in politics nowadays. Politicians who want to get before the microphone for a for a photo op, well, then they should get behind the phone and make a phone call as well. Did you just, tonight, we're talking about also not only your case, but there were 8 children who were murdered in Louisiana tonight, in Shreveport, Louisiana, by their father. All 8 children were shot by their father today.
Oh my God.
And you know who we saw on TV? All the politicians. All the politicians ran to the microphone crying and saying, how could this happen? Now, I get that. Okay. But really, are we that far lost that you and your messaging is much more important than the investigators even finishing what took place? This is what needs to happen. That needs to stop. Politicians need to stay out of the limelight and let the work be done, and let the police tell, or let the authorities say this is what took place, and not get in front of the microphones.
Stop
Did we
acting
not
like
just do a show
vultures.
on this, John? Gary?
Stop acting like vultures.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Anyone
that you don't come running out like a dog whistle being blown to find a camera because there's been a shooting tragedy. But what do I know? I'm just an old dumb cop.
Yeah, the fact is, because then it does create this messaging of two-tiered. And Rachel deserves, again, standing alongside her, not standing behind her or putting her in a line.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. So,
well, the reason I'm so pleased that I was able to appear tonight with John and Chris, and it really, in the heart, I really mean it, is that I love any situation that forces people out in the world to realize that these people, these statistics, are human beings. That if you were to reach into the pool of statistics and take any person out, there is a whole world of people whose hearts have been broken, and a whole sort of place in the world that will never be the same, because that person isn't there to do what they were called to do in the world, in their particular place in the world. And I think that you are ferociously keeping her alive, like a flame you won't let go out. And I think that's beautiful. I really do, because what you're doing is you're in the face of cynicism and in the face of people who want to render her a statistic. You're saying, right, you're going to look at her. You're going to look at her. She was a person. She was a human being. And in doing that, you undo precisely what it is that the offender thought of her, that she was just an object or an unhuman, a non-human. And I think that by doing that, you force, because let me tell you, that offender is out in the world and probably looks at some of this stuff. And every time you do this and you're out in the world, you're saying, remember her. She's a person. That's a person. You're going to have to account for this one day, one way or another. And I think that's very, very powerful. And it really speaks to how much you love her. I mean, it sounds like she was all you had in the world. She was your center of the world.
Well, and she taught me how to be a mom. So, yes.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And so, I want you to understand, I work with a lot of people who have lost family in this way. And, it's really nice to see you sort of standing for all of them and going like, we're not letting you vanish, Don't you guys agree? I mean, it's
100%. And so we have a tradition.
Yes.
With victims' families here, Rachel. And if you're okay with it and you feel comfortable, John, myself, and Dr. Bricado are going to go off the screen, and we're going to let you tell the world what you want about anything relating to how you're feeling and how you want to see Nicole's case move forward. Okay. And so you get the final word. And then we always I like to end on kind of an upbeat note of where we go to Hawaii. Okay. And you'll see it when you're done. Don't be surprised when this thing kicks in and, it's kind of an upbeat song. But I think your story is powerful. And like Dr. Bricado just said, the least we can do is help you keep her out front. So I'm going to pull out. Dr. Gary's going to pull out, and John, and then you have the world right in front of you. So, and by the way, we have people from all over the world that are watching tonight. And so that said, hang on, I'm going to pull us all out of here. Okay, it's all you, young lady.
All right. Hi. I just want to share with you who my daughter was. She was an amazing person. She really was. She was such a bright light. And she had so much going for her. And for the person that took her from me, I hope every day you wake up and you think about it. Because there's not a day go by that I don't think about this kid. I think about her all the time. I need peace. But it's not about me. It's about justice for my daughter. She's worth it. She was a beautiful person. Very beautiful. Inside and out. And that shows from the type of friends that she had that stood behind her, beside her, in front of her, protected her. Friends that you would only hope for. She knew how to be a friend. That was the thing. Nicole knew how to be a friend to someone. So, it's like my family needs peace. Her dad needs peace. I need peace. I'm just hoping that one day this can all be behind us and we can go on with our lives. But never forget her. She's worth it. Thank you.
Hard working every day. I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts. Wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah. Make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away. You and me go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, my face in a while.